I think they were hoping for somebody with better technical skills. Not a good start, but yeah,
We got it. We got it.
yeah, if you're my name, please, let us know who you actually are. Now I do have some questions for you guys in the chat, so I'm admitting more of myself in. A little bit of background about myself. So yes, I started Cogeco around 2 months ago. I just graduated from Columbia University with a master's of Jewish studies. My specialty is Soviet Jewish studies, I guess, specifically Soviet Jewish refugees. So, Cogeco is really a perfect fit. Actually, when we came up with the idea for this presentation, the war had not started yet in Israel. And then it was like really crazy because it really felt like what we were talking about was, happening, as we speak. So I thought it would be really interesting to kind of go back in time and kind of see where it all started, where did these myths come from, and how do we see it play out today? And obviously we chose to do it on November 9th, 2023, which is exactly 85 years after Kristallnacht. So honestly, some guiding questions to start us on our presentation, some things to think
Monica,
about.
if you make me a co-host, I'll be happy to admit people so you don't have to.
Oh, I thought I did.
Yeah, you
Okay, so
don't
if
have
I
to get
go to you, okay.
and make
Okay,
co-host.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so you don't have to get distracted and admit people.
okay. All right. Okay, so some guiding questions kind of that we can talk about at the end. What are your ideas for why society has anti-Semitism? Why do you think some places may be more anti-Semitic over others? And has anti-Semitism developed over time, or is it based on the same root? And how does understanding anti-Semitism help us in the present today to further fight anti-Semitism? Okay, so right before we go back, to even before the Christian world, kind of define what is or what is not anti-Semitism. So the historical meaning of a Semite really does not necessarily mean a Jewish person. It just means somebody who spoke a Semitic language. So that's what you see on the right here. People who spoke or were part of a Semitic group or a Semitic language, or it came to be understood as somebody who does not have Christian blood. So if you were an anti-Semite, you were against someone who didn't have Christian blood. Something that's like kind of hard to understand is that there is anti-Semitism in places where we do not even have Jews. People can be anti-Semitic and have never even seen a Jew in their life. When I was doing the research for this presentation, what I found was that historians and academia in general has a really hard time of defining anti-Semitism because it's always developing and changing, and right, anti-Semitism is very much a living thing. It's not something that happened and then that's it. So obviously, first and foremost, anti-Semitism is a social construct. It was something that was created and something that was made up. And what we're going to kind of see, like our main overarching theme is this, concept of the Jew, like something that's scary, fantasy, something that's all over the world. It's everything. It's capitalist, it's socialist, it's powerful, it's this fear of like the unknown, something that they know that we don't know. That's we're gonna see in almost right every slide and every single part of history. Okay, let me just pull up. Okay, so that's now we're gonna pass through a lot of history. So again, at the end, please feel free to ask questions or to give comments because we're gonna go a little bit kind of all the way from the medieval world all the way to the present.
Can you explain the graph?
Yeah. So honestly, I myself, this is just kind of showing every single group throughout history that we now, can say derived from a Semitic language, right? So you see like classical Arabic, like Arabs are considered Semites. it even is for me kind of difficult. It's just kind of this point that, right, originally Semites did not necessarily even mean Jews. That's kind of something that's been developed over time. It was just somebody who did not have Christian blood or belong to one of these, like we're talking like hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Assyrians, Babylonians, like their languages evolved from what we call Semitic languages. Now, I'm not a linguist, so I can't go super into it.
Can we maximize the slide? Somebody's asking in the chat. Yeah.
I think it's maximized. I'm not sure what else I could do.
Maybe they can just move the border between the.
How about now? Is that better? Is that better?
The person who asked maybe has that minimized because you're
right, because I'm on full slideshow, so I don't know what else I could do.
How about now?
Right, because I don't know, because this is as big as it goes on Google Docs. Okay, hopefully somebody maybe can message that person and help them out. Okay. Okay, so let's again, we're almost there. I just want to give like a couple of quotes as we get introduced. Like again, things that I thought were just like quite crazy while I was doing the research for this program. How I guess just like how intense anti-Semitism is, that in 1944, right, the Third Reich, the Nazi office declared the Jewish question is the key to history. Stephen England, who's a scholar, he wrote, ponder this a moment. One of the smaller minorities on the planet is alleged to be responsible for developments of world historical import, liberalism, capitalism, socialism, trade unions, banking, class, and international war. Consider the immensity of the claim that the social question is the Jewish question. So yeah, that, Jews are responsible for all these things. And last one, scholar Alan Confino. I do not believe the centuries of anti-Semitism produced the Holocaust, but I do believe that the Holocaust cannot be explained without the deep tradition of anti-Judaism. Okay, so just kind of these quotes. Oh, what did I do? No.
Go ahead. We will take care of the.
Okay.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Okay. So with all that said, kind of this background of this, that anti-Semitism is very much something made up. It's something that's a social construct. Anti-Semitism was originally, we can think of it more as anti-Judaism. And we see anti-Semitism, or what is anti-Judaism, even before Christianity comes to place, but it really becomes big in the Christian world. So around the year 400, we have someone called Augustine of Hippo, who wrote in 400, The City of God. He wrote a book basically explaining that Jews killed Jesus, which is why they're, lived this weird life of exile and why they were kicked out of the Roman Empire and lost their territory. Right. So there's kind of the same myth that we're starting to come about. That there's something about them that they must know that we don't know, because no matter what, they won't accept the teachings of Jesus Christ. They will not become Catholic. There's something in them. They know something that we don't know. So really what kicks off a lot of violence in the medieval period is the Crusades. That's when we sort of see, right, this call for the Christian world, and Jews obviously suffer a lot of results of this around the year 1000. And then we see the first recorded blood libel, which is seen in this guy on the right, who is, I just forgot how old he was. I think he was 14, William of Norwich, who was killed in 1144, and obviously was not explainable why he died. And usually when things were not explainable, the Jews were blamed. So, right, nobody could quite understand why this kid who killed him. So they said, oh, it must have been the Jews. And blood libel, we're going to see that all the way up to the Nazi period, of something that the Jews were responsible for. And again, this came up a lot during part of Passover, that Jews were killing, Christian children. because they needed it in their matzah, right? And a lot of like memories came up that the Jews had crucified. They were responsible for killing Jesus, and that came up every Easter. So a lot of these things, like if things were undefinable, it was usually the Jews. So as we see in the medieval world, Jews were started to be blamed for the plagues, and there was, belief that they were poisoning the well since they weren't getting sick. So there was something that they knew that the rest of the Catholic world didn't know. But at the same point, there was this realization that Jews were actually quite useful for society. Why? Because Catholics cannot charge each other interest. So who did that? That was the Jews. Now, I will say at the same time, it is kind of a myth to say that not that all Jews were involved in usury. And at the same time, it is a myth to say that not all Jews could get into something like a medieval guild or be a merchant. There are like some definites that, Jews cannot be farmers, and Jews did obviously not have the same rights as Christians. But there were like some cases of Jews being merchants and Jews getting into guilds, but overall there was discrimination. And obviously, when there were issues in a country, Jews were blamed to the point where they were expelled. Obviously, very famous in Spain in 1492 with the start of the Inquisition. England in the 13th century, France in the 14th century, Germany, there's no, direct Germany at this point, but, certain parts of Germany are kicking out Jews. So at this point, right, there is a solution to this, right? We can make them they may be Jews, but we can convert them. We can save them from this. So it's really more of like an anti-Judaism at this point. And then I just had you can't even, when you go to these libels, like you can't even imagine how many happened over the years. So that is really what also led to, at some point, right, if we need the Jews for society, we can put them somewhere, right? We can mark them, we can put something on them, and we can put them in something called the ghetto. And the first ghetto was actually in 1516 in Venice. And Jews were actually locked in there at night to make sure that, right, if there was a fear or something like that. So this is kind of our ideas of the medieval world and where we see the birth of these myths from the Catholic world. Yes, I see somebody has a question. I think you can unmute yourself, yeah?
My question is, so if we postulate that the reason there was anti-Judaism was the religion, was there any other religious groups in Europe at that time other than Jews and Christians?
Well, there were, obviously there was the Arab world. We will get to that, but no, we didn't quite see, when we get to the Arab world, we don't quite see the same kind of, obviously through trade, like anti-Semitic ideas were coming to the Arab world, but there's nothing necessarily in Islam that's written, right? Like Jews and Arabs are, that they're, right? There was nothing quite as serious as like Jews had killed Jesus. So yeah, really we're in a very, very Catholic world where we don't even see Martin Luther yet, he's also very anti-Semitic, but he creates, right, Protestantism. But at this point, we're really in a very Christian Catholic world.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or ideas? No. And then the photo below is showing like blaming, it's like a medieval painting of Jews being blamed for the plague and them being attacked. Okay. So again, we're going kind of through hundreds of years. So we are moving We're moving kind of into the world of human rights, civil rights, emancipation, right? The world of the French Revolution, which is 1789. And right, there's this hope, okay, if we have all these things coming into fruition, like industrialization, liberalism, all these things, urbanization, civil rights, what we think of the Enlightenment, we can get rid of anti-Semitism, right? If we can be less religious now, we're out of these dark ages. we can get rid of anti-Semitism. And in the Jewish world, there's also like this understanding, okay, if the world's changing, we also have to change, which is known as the Haskalah, the Jewish Enlightenment, which starts in Germany with Moses Mendelssohn, who's actually depicted in this painting on the bottom of the right by Oppenheimer. This is like a painting of actually them trying to convince him to convert, funny enough. But Moses Mendelssohn, he wants the Jewish world, to move with the modern world, kind of find this way of how do we mix Judaism with this modern world? Do we stop speaking Yiddish? Do we do our services on the same day Christians do? How do we find a way to fit in to the point where you even see here on the top, the Jewish Almanach, which is written in German, not in Yiddish. As we see, though, Jews are also at this point, if things don't go right, they're also, again, there's something that we don't know that they know. They're still being blamed for things like modernity, capitalism, socialism, atheism. At the same time, if there's like any kind of anti-Semitism, now, people are reading again. People are trying to learn to read, and there's, the modern printing press. So a lot of these myths that came from the medieval world, they're still there. We don't see them kind of go away. But something kind of new happens, right? If you're gonna be French, or you're gonna be German, or whatever it is, are you both Jewish or French? Or can you have this kind of double identity? Okay. And we're going to talk about what's going on in Eastern Europe in just one moment, because I've kind of focused more on Western Europe. And as Jews are kind of emancipated, that's a hard word to say. They are not seen necessarily as, finally there's civil rights, they can be equal as us. They're actually seen more as competition. Right. And they, again, at this point, they're still the solution. If the worst, they can convert. They can still come away from this, and we can fix them. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's going on in Eastern Europe. So a lot of the things from the medieval world move to Eastern Europe, right? Especially from something we see known as the Pale of Settlement. This was like a solution, I guess, for the Russian Empire. If we gonna have this large Jewish population, we can't have them just live anywhere. We're gonna have them live in this piece of land that is actually the size of France, which I think is always an interesting fact. But we do not see the same kind of things that are going on in the West that are going on in the East. There's definitely, it takes a lot longer time for these Jews to be emancipated. In the Russian Empire, there's kind of this slow emancipation, depending on if you're able to join the Russian army and serve an insane amount of years, or if you're able to get into a university, then you can kind of leave the pale. I mean, there was lots of like studies of people leaving illegally and trying to, learn how to speak Russian and going all over this area. And at the same point, we don't have this same kind of what we see in Germany going on of assimilation. There's still pogroms, right? If anything goes wrong, Jews are blamed. Pogroms, which actually leads to 2.5 million Jews who are running to Germany. And again, they kind of clash with these assimilated German Jews, and this huge 2.5 million, they ran to the US, a lot of them. There's kind of a divide in Judaism. We don't just see one side, everyone's going to assimilate and everyone's going to become liberal. Actually, more movements are moved, right? One of those movements is Zionism, right? That we no matter what we do, we've been giving equal rights. So we can't do anything. We need our own state. Or there's also a movement towards even more being more religious and kind of towards Hasidism, which started in Ukraine. Let's be even more religious. Let's stay away from this assimilation. So once again, we kind of see, what are you going to be loyal to? Who are you going to be? Can we be part of this society? Or, once we are able to join society, are we still going to be blamed? if something happens. There's a very famous case study of the Brodsky family, who started a huge like sugar factory from beets in Kiev, became very, very, very wealthy. They were also, a lot of anti-Semitism because of that. But again, we can't let these Jews out. They know something we don't know. They become wealthy. In a lot of cases, the Jews were very poor in Eastern Europe. Okay. So, any questions on that? So we're really starting to move into the modern world, and what we think of today of anti-Semitism comes about in 1879 by German journalist William Mayer. So this is kind of the period where racism comes to be, and a lot of like scientific experiments that say no, right? We figured it out. There is something about the Jewish people that makes them different from us. They're racially different. They're a Jewish race. And right, Jews become seen as backwards. So we can no longer convert them. There's really, the Jewish question is moving to something scientific, right? Something that we can actually say, yes, here's our solution. And they're racially inferior. And like some of these things they came up with were kind of crazy. Like at one point, this one was always the craziest to me, that Jews have flat feet. And since they have flat feet, they're really bad soldiers. And since they're bad soldiers, they made us lose World War I. Like this is a true Nazi thinking. So we can blame their racial inferiority and why we're in this mess. Right? That they have this Jewish, or I guess Semitic nose. And at the same time, in Tsarist Russia, and it actually starts from France, but moves to Tsarist Russia, they produce a book called The Protocols of the Leaders of Zion. We're going to see that come up again as we keep going further into history. This is like, again, we finally have the printing press. We're really getting modern. We have something. We figured it out. We figured out these Jews, right? They're racially backwards, and there's they know everything. They have like this conspiracy, the Protocols of the Leaders of Zion, that the Jews have some network together. And they control the world. That's basically what this book says. Actually, this is a really crazy fact. The Nazis, the Nazi period, we see over 23 editions of this book come out. 23. The book specifically does warn people about Bolshevism, that the Jews are also planning socialism, which kind of brings us to our next slide. Again, that everything that happens in the world and every failure and everything, it's all some Jewish plan. Any questions? So now we're going back to any questions? Okay, no. Okay, so we can talk a little bit about Eastern Europe again, back and forth. Yeah, go ahead, Veronica.
Yeah, thank you. I just realized I have no idea where the word Judy comes from. Do you have an idea?
Judy, well.
From Jude.
Juden, yeah.
Okay.
From Juden, yeah. And then the Germans would say that they want Germany to be Juden free. So Žid, Juden, yeah. Okay, so before we get to Kristallnacht and the Nazi period, the elders, the Protocols of Zion, let's just talk about where Bolshevism does come to place, right? The Soviet Union. So once Jews are finally able to join Russian society, they're very much blamed for joining the economy and lowering Russian wages. And they're blamed basically for everything. They're somehow blamed for being capitalist and failing to bring liberalism to Russia. Now, if you think about it, Bolshevism sounds quite good to the Jews of the Russian Empire. Why? Because if you bring, a socialist kind of society, you no longer are marked as a Jew, right? There's no more religion there. Everyone's equal. So once, right, with the revolution of 1917, Vladimir Lenin, it takes him a really long time to actually, develop what he thinks is socialism. He calls it the new economic plan, and it's rapid industrialization. Right, it's very, very difficult to do this. It's not a good economic period. So who are blamed? Of course, the Jews. So really this anti-Semitism we see doesn't go away. And we're gonna get to, the Holocaust in just a second, but right, just on the right is I wanted to point out a photo I took recently in Berlin at the, I don't remember what the museum, they gave it such a difficult name. It's like the Russian-German museum, like the museum of
that's where the capitulation was signed.
Yeah, that's where they signed the treaty, but they really renamed it since the war. Yeah, it's like the war that shows, I guess, the whole fight against the Soviet Union, the Nazi fight, the German fight, Operation Barbarossa. And this one just like really struck me, this propaganda that was being put in Ukraine. And Jews are like rats, like just awful. So yes, Jews in the Soviet Union, mostly in the West, very much suffered in the Holocaust. We're going to get to that. Okay, so that brings us to why we're here tonight. Right, the memorial. So on October 9th to the 10th, we see what some of these images on the right. Everything, Jewish shops, homes, stores, and synagogues were vandalized. We are 5 years into the Nazi period at this point. It began in 1933. We are in 1938. 1935 were the Nuremberg laws. So Jews were, taken away all their rights at this point. Kristallnacht was not just out of nowhere. It was a response to Jews who assassinated a German ambassador in Paris, whose name was Ernst von Rath. And right, Jews were blamed for this, and that they had to compensate the Germans for the damages. So can you believe they made them pay for this? They destroyed everything, and then they said, you have to pay for it. And this is the first time we actually see Jews being sent to concentration camps. The first 30,000 were sent. So this is kind of right. We see the solution, the road to what becomes the most extreme anti-Semitism we see. I would say this is definitely a key point. Something that I don't always think about is that it didn't just happen in Germany. This was also in Austria and Sudetenland, which is now modern day Czech Republic, or back then I guess it was Czechoslovakia. And then the next slide I'm gonna show you. I have one quick statistics. 1,400 synagogues were destroyed this night, and more than 10% of Jews were arrested in these areas. And everything that happened was, of course, put in the press. And any Polish Jews who lived in Germany at the time were expelled. Another, I think, kind of interesting fact. So let's just show the next photo. I have more. So as you see here on the right in this map, this is every single city where cities and synagogues were destroyed. And right, obviously up in Prussia too. We see the Sudetenland. So it was like quite a serious strike. No, these are all Aryanization laws. When we went to the Jewish Museum in Berlin, I thought they had a really cool exhibit where they showed how this was actually kind of a gradual process. Like every day, a different law was put against Jews. So they had, it was really cool. They had banners for each day, like what kind of laws were enacted against Jews. And obviously there was an insane number of banners from 1933. These are just, right, some of the laws. I think a lot of them are quite crazy. Like, again, this all fear of this mythical Jew, this is this creature, that they know something that we don't know, that we have to protect ourselves from this. We see these like medieval myths coming back. So we see this, you know, from the press, the blood libel. This is like from 1933, a newspaper. We see the Jude Star from the medieval world. The formation of the ghetto. Like, these were not things that Hitler invented. Like, Hitler was very much, I would say, a student of history. He clearly knew history and brought these things back and very much believed in them. Right, even recently when I went with Kojeko for Germany Close Up, there's like a lot of things that I just didn't even know, that I thought were so insane. Like, they made Jews give up their pets, which is just so cruel, and they made them give away their radios. They couldn't even drive. And all Jews had to take the second name of either Israel for a man or Sarah for a woman. Curfews, like, they got even more specific. Everything something we're going to speak about next is originally the plan wasn't the final solution. The plan was Adolf Eichmann, who's obviously very famous for being this one of the people in charge of the final solution. He was originally the Office of Emigration, so there was first a hope that they would get rid of all the Jews, but you kind of see this is getting more and more insane and more intense, and being like, this is the solution to our Jewish question. Like, this is what we have to do. Any questions or anything that really strikes you here? I mean, I feel like these laws really strike me.
I was kind of just thinking, since we were seeing the Stürmer, I was just thinking of the modern daily stormer in the US when I was looking at. So that was all.
Okay. So this is obviously an anniversary of a very difficult and sad day, and something that started an even crazier radicalization process of just like a belief of something that doesn't even exist. Some more things that I just thought, this is, our anti-Semitism is so intense at this point. There's nothing you can do. There's like no way to fix them. There's no way to make them not to fix their Semitism, their racial Semitism. They just can't become Germans. Okay. So by early 1942 or 1941, they said that, Hitler gave the order in 1941, 1942, early 1942 is the Wannsee Conference. A lot of the head members of the Nazi Party come together and kind of agree on the final solution: kill all and every Jew in Europe. Okay. So this is not a presentation on the Holocaust. Obviously, the Holocaust is very tragic, but we're gonna kind of move from the most extreme to today, to after the Holocaust, right? So after this awful, the death of more than 6 million Jews, and this worst final solution, we think that anti-Semitism is over, right? The UN is there to help us. There's going to be a Jewish state. Israel is going to come to exist in 1948, right? We're going to show the world what happens, and this is not exactly what happens in the after period of the Holocaust. What you see in the picture on the right is 1946 in Poland. Jews come back. These are Jewish Holocaust survivors who come back, and there's a pogrom. It's just awful to think of, but there is a pogrom when they come back to take their apartments, to start new businesses, to start their lives. There are pogroms, and in many ways, once again, we see the Jews are blamed for their own Holocaust, and there's really a failure of denazification in many European countries. And now we're finally going to start talking a little bit about the Arab world. So somebody asked that. Jews of the Arab world also start to really feel anti-Semitism, which we'll talk about next, how that starts from the Nazi Empire. They become targets specifically of anti-Zionism, but even if these Jews are not necessarily Zionists or want to go to Israel, they are targeted. Let me pull up right in 1947 to 1948, Jews are fleeing from Morocco, Algeria, Egypt, Libya, Syria, Yemen, Iraq, where Zionism was a crime in these states. There were pogroms in Yemen. Jews had their bank accounts frozen, most of these. Jews were like bombed in Egypt. 586,000 Jews leave all these countries, huge number, to go to Israel, and 200,000 flee to other parts of Europe. And so really, in the 50s, it takes a long time for Jews to be specifically seen as victims and targeted of the Holocaust. We still see a lot of pogroms in the late 40s of any survivors. We do see kind of a change in 1956, right? We've gone through hundreds and hundreds of years. Only in 1956 does the Vatican give a speech saying Jews are not to blame for the crucifixion of Jesus. Like, wow, 1956 is the first time we see a solution to that myth. Right, the 60s brings a new wave. Adolf Eichmann is found, obviously amazing story if you don't know it, by the Mossad. They find Eichmann in Argentina. They bring him to Israel. Sorry, that doesn't make sense. Brings Judaism awareness. I meant that they brings awareness of the Holocaust. That's really when Holocaust awareness starts. But it doesn't last very long. We see a new wave of anti-Semitism in 1967 when Israel starts a war, and not Israel. Israel's attacked and they conquer a lot of territory in 67. And again, there's this Elders of Zion comes back once more, right? That they're back. They know something we don't know, and right, they're even saying that at one point we'll see that the Holocaust happened. Why? Because the Jews wanted their own state. So they did it. They were in charge, like whatever, just not to be blamed themselves. Okay, so we're past the Holocaust. What is going on in the Soviet Union? Anti-Semitism is, so many Jews are killed specifically by bullets, and also in concentration camps in the territory of the Soviet Union. And Jews are marked as a nationality, right, in the 5th line of the passport. Even though religion is banned, you cannot be Ukrainian, Moldovan, Romanian, wherever you're from. You are Jewish. Just like I spoke about, there's definitely a lot of anti-Semitism brought to the Soviet Union because of the 1967 war. This Elders of Zion, that Jews are blamed for Israeli imperialism with America, that they're all behind this imperialistic. And that at some point, you can probably, maybe some of you even can relate, right? Like my mom always said that when she was a kid, people were always telling you, like, go to your Israel, even if my mom didn't even know what Israel was. So there's a lot of hatred that Jews can start emigrating as early as 1966 and kind of in waves. There's anger that they can leave. Something that is interesting is there's much more anti-Semitism in the West of the Soviet Union than in the East. We'll talk about that, why. And there's obviously Soviet Jews who are not allowed in certain university programs, certain jobs, certain military positions. They're just kept out, discrimination. And in the 1980s, as the Soviet Union falls, we see the rise of a Russian organization led by Dmitry Vasilyev, called Pamyat, or Memory in English. They rise to power in the 1980s. And they're really scary. They're obviously Russian nationalists, and they have groups all over what was the former Soviet Union then, kind of calling for the Russian Tsar to come back, for everyone to have the glory of the Russian Empire. And they blame Jews for Chernobyl, like cancer, like anything possible. They blame the Jews. When I was doing my thesis at Columbia, I saw a lot of Pamyat mentioned in a lot of cases of why Soviet Jews wanted to flee. They were throwing rocks at Jews and really awful, terrible things. Any questions? Another thing that's interesting is originally when the state of Israel was created in 1948, there was a hope. France mostly supported Israel at that point. Interestingly enough, it was later this kind of love with America started. So there was kind of a hope that the Soviet Union and Israel would be close because they were kind of more towards socialist then. And right, 1967 was kind of this heartbreak. All relations were cut off between the two.
Can I ask, how did you not lose your sanity during your master's? If that's information you were...
I'm sorry, what was the question? How do I not lose my what?
Mind in your master's.
Oh, my mind?
Reading all this stuff.
That's a great question. I mean, for me, it's really was this hope that these cases and these stories would get some sort of justice. I mean, unless I went to the archive, I could not find these cases. Like there's not nearly as much like scholarly work on like Soviet Jewish refugees. It just doesn't exist, this book. Some books are written about personal memoirs, but nothing ever about many hundreds and thousands of cases in the highest archives. And right, like Jews had to write reasons why they were leaving the Soviet Union, and they had to give examples of anti-Semitism. And I mean, the hope was also that they were able to leave and they would have a better life in America or in Israel or in Germany or wherever they were going. But no, that's a good question for any, I guess, historian, anyone who, I guess, deals with hard cases. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your acquired in the hard way knowledge.
Yeah. Okay, so we're kind of getting to the 70s, this point. Kind of a really modern world, really, really modern. So media and internet is kind of our main distributor of these myths. Think of TikTok today. So something we have that is also anti-Semitism is the denial of the Holocaust. So a lot of false comparisons are also denial. Right, like, and we have this great book written by, oh yes, really great, infamous, I guess, book written about the founding myths of modern Israel, right? The whole shocking truth on Zionism and Holocaust. They all made it up. It's all not true. It was all a scam. So I kind of just made a little paragraph of some ways you can see Holocaust denial coming out, which is part of anti-Semitism. Right, one is like the number of Jews killed in the Holocaust was inflated. This one is used commonly, that Jews used the Holocaust for their advantage. They made money off of it. Films, books, classes, like that one's crazy. Or again, like Jews deserved it. Like look at them. This is we see it right now. I'll show it. Like you probably maybe seen yourself, like, why didn't Hitler finish the job? Or they were clearly deserving of them. This one was seen in the Soviet Union. Jews were only one of the groups who suffered the Holocaust. So in the Soviet Union, right, if you went to Babi Yar, where over 33,000 Jews were killed in 2 days, it did not, until really the modern Ukraine, it never said, specifically Jews were killed there. It just said all Soviet people suffered in the Holocaust. So yeah, these were all kind of this bigger picture that Jews created their own myth, that the Holocaust was a myth and they made it up, because again, they're behind everything, so we have to be afraid of them. Something that I guess is kind of new and kind of came up to me recently in Germany, this idea of like secondary anti-Semitism, which means hating Jews because they cause you guilt, which definitely comes up a lot in Germany. And then here on the right, this is Ayatollah Khomeini, who did the Iranian Revolution, and Iran is very famous for Holocaust denial. And again, they'll use a lot of these strategies. They won't necessarily say like I don't know, there's some recognition, but they'll never say, this was a terrible thing that happened to them. that would kind of use many of these strategies. So where did this, where did this come from? Like someone asked if it's mostly anti-Judaism, where did this happen? Where did we get this Arab world anti-Semitism? So as I said earlier, right, like these ideas were coming to the Arab world through trade. But there's nothing inherently in Islam itself that says there's this animosity between Jews and Arabs, but there is Islamism, which created animosity, and it was very much published and publicized. Specifically by a guy you may know here on the bottom on the right, that is Adolf Hitler, meeting with the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. So the Nazis, they quickly realized that there could definitely be a great to send propaganda in Arabic, and that there were Jews in the Arabic world. So they met there in 1941, and Hitler said that he recognized the Mufti's battle against Zionism and his hope for pan-Arabism. And then he thanked him for recruiting Muslims for the SS in what was back then Yugoslavia. So in 1950, Egyptian writer Sayyid Qutb wrote Our Struggle with the Jews to explain that Jews are actually Islam's enemy, and they have been disobeying God for years. And actually, Hitler sent extermination as a punishment from Allah, from their God, Allah. And the Jews are kind of with the West, and the West is our enemy as more countries became kind of this fundamentalist. And again, like this idea that the world is actually the fundamentalist Islamic world is actually just warning the world, right? Like Israel, this part of the Middle East is just the first, right? Until they conquer it all. So the Elders of Zion very much takes its own life after the Holocaust in the Arab world. And anti-Zionism becomes a part of all these fundamentalist governments that start to take power in the Middle East. And right, they don't recognize if you're either Jew or Zionist. Like they don't care if you're a non-Zionist Jew. And obviously Holocaust denial is very much part of their propaganda. And if you're interested in more about this, on November 28th, Yigal Kotler, who's here with us, he will be doing a lecture at 7:30 p.m. Also free, also on Zoom, Judaism and Islam, past and present. So he will give a lot more insights that I did not give. And so these are some protocols of the Elders of Zion in Arabic. Let me just pull up the date for the one on the right. The one on the right was published in 1994, and it actually became a TV show, if you believe it or not. And on the left, the first translation of this book, written by Muhammad Khalifa al-Tunisi about the Elders of Zion, was published in 1951. Yeah, that's our next Jewish Academy of Heritage. So we're getting really to the end. We're really modern now. We're really getting to today. I call this, very modern anti-Semitism. So we kind of see where these myths came from and where they are today. So Jews are still, scapegoats when things don't make sense. A very, modern one was obviously COVID-19 and 9/11. Some quotes are that the Jews were taking advantage of COVID to kill off the white race, or they were using it to take this Elders of Zion, that they know something that we don't know, that there's something that we're looking for truth. That's kind of what we call revisionist anti-Semitism. Right, again, Jews and the Mossad did 9/11. Again, they're all master plans. We have to prepare ourselves. We have to warn ourselves. Fascists, this is kind of what they believe, that we're always double agents. You can never trust us. Obviously Kanye West, who said it's right about the Jews. I thought that was actually in Colorado in the last election, you could vote for Kanye West on our ballot. Fun fact. So here we are, we're really today. just some statistics, I guess, to end your nights. Very, very modern anti-Semitism. And I think these are even up since then. Like, since I did this slide, I think these are up. The Jerusalem Post reported a 400% increase in anti-Semitism. I think this is even up. All of these London reports, so 1,353% increase in the rise of anti-Semitic hate crimes. In New York City, a 164% increase of hate crimes from September to October. I think you can all say, right, Jews around the world are feeling not safe, are targeted. I mean, I saw a school in Montreal today, like kids were, I think they were shot at. I didn't, it's awful things. Right, whether they have anything to do with Israel or not, Jewish kids, Jewish people are being targeted. And this idea is never again now. And there's Gilad Ardain, who is the UN ambassador, Israeli ambassador to the UN, who was actually at the rally in Manhattan on Monday, and he gave a speech. He was there again with this star that obviously comes from the medieval world. So I guess that leads me really, really to our end, and I'd love to hear from you guys. All right, there's the sign I said, please keep the world clean, right? That was seen at a protest in NYU a couple weeks ago. Or no, yeah, I think like a week ago. Please keep the world clean. Again, they know something that we don't know. And on the right, maybe Sam can give us the exact translation of the German. But it says,
I can't hear it anymore. Guilt, Holocaust. I can't hear it anymore.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so right, this is that we can't this is kind of something that came up a lot when we were in Germany, that like I can't listen to it anymore. I'm tired of it. I don't want to know. We're not going to be responsible anymore. Okay, so that's the end. I'm happy to hear your thoughts. Yes, go ahead.